Today we're going to look at fourth species counterpoint. At the heart of fourth species counterpoint lies the non-chord tone concept that we call the suspension. A suspension is a special kind of non-chord tone, which is a carefully prepared, accented dissonance. This dissonance comes about through the delay of one of the notes of a consonant interval. If we delayed or tied over this top note of these 2/6, we can see that it creates a dissonance. And this dissonance is accented because it occurs on the strong beat. Here's another example. So a suspension as a non-chord tone has three components. It has the preparation, which is a consonance, the dissonant suspension, and then a resolution downward by step. And that's very important. All suspensions must resolve downward. Here's an example of a fourth species exercise. Just like second species, we begin with a half rest and the interval of either a fifth or an octave. But this is different than second species. Notice how each second note of the measure is tied over to the strong beat or the first note of the subsequent measure. And this takes place throughout the exercise. So one of the most important rules of fourth species is that every second note of the measure is tied to the first of the subsequent measure. You must write ties over the bar line. Another thing that makes this different than second species is that all weak beats, or second notes of each measure, must be consonant. Now remember, in second species they could be consonant or dissonant, but that's not the case in fourth species. Let's take a listen to this exercise. You can really hear how these prepared accented dissonances bring out the dynamic qualities of the counterpoint. But let's take a look at the strong beat of select measures. You can, in fourth species, have a consonance on the strong beat, and here we have one that's left by leap, which is fine because it's a consonance. Here's another example of a consonance on the strong beat. But dissonances in fourth species must always resolve downward by step, like this dissonance here. And they only occur on the strong note, like this dissonance here. And again, it resolves downward by step. Let's now take a look at all of the rules governing fourth species counterpoint. Just like in second species, for every one note that you're given in the cantus firmus, you're to write two notes. And rule number 1 says that the previous rules that we've learned in terms of parallel motion and melodic augmented and diminished intervals and so forth, they all apply to fourth species counterpoint. What doesn't apply, of course, is how consonants and dissonants are used and where they occur. Rule number 2 defines this for fourth species. All weak beats, that means the second note of every measure, must be consonant and must be connected to the following strong beat, so that means over the bar line, through the use of a tie. Rule number 3, strong beats may be consonant or dissonant. That means the first note of every measure can be consonant or dissonant, and if it is dissonant, it must resolve downward to a consonance by step. And of course, in music, we call this kind of non-chord tone a suspension. Rule number 4 and 5 are similar to the rules for second species. You want to avoid successive, that means 2 in a row, of 6/5 patterns, because what that does is it creates delayed parallel fifths, or staggered parallel fifths. And rule number 5 simply means the same thing for 9/8 or 2/1 measures. That means intervals of a second or compound second leading to an octave or unison, create delayed parallel octaves, which are similarly problematic. Rule number 6 is a gift to all counterpoint students. When you write fourth species counterpoint, sometimes you feel like the exercise is writing itself, and you can find that after about 8 measures, you've written yourself into a corner, and all you did was put one note down on the page at the beginning. For this reason, we allow the student of counterpoint to break the tie one time in each exercise. You don't have to, but you have that option. But when you do break the tie, you must use second species rules. In other words, go back to how consonance and dissonance occurs in second species. But be careful. When breaking the tie, never write 2 dissonances in a row. And finally, you must end in one of the ways shown here. This can be tricky, but not insurmountable. Just remember that if you have a tie going to a dissonance, it must resolve downward by step.